I'm just chilling here until everybody gets on the line, get situated for some more Harry Potter. I don't know what's going on. I think I've got a couple people watching. I'm just going to give it another couple of seconds until everybody has a chance to get on. Because I think we're still short at least one. But, yeah. Previously on Harry Potter, Harry's parents were killed by Voldemort, and as a baby he was left with his aunt and uncle, who are abusive to him, and they spoil their other son, who is overweight. And there's the other son is a bully, or not other son, but their son is a bully. Harry learns right before or right on his 11th birthday that he is actually a wizard. And the person who brought him that information is Hagrid, the keeper of keys at Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. I don't know who's missing from this live. I'm just gonna start. Cool. I'm just gonna start reading because I don't want to make everybody wait too long while I'm waiting for somebody. So as long as I've got Nick, what? You want to land me? You can speak. Justin's over here speaking to me, and it makes me sound like a crazy person because he was afraid to speak and he was miming at me instead of talking to me. If the person that I'm missing is Nick, who's never read these before, and when you get on, just holler at me, and I don't know, we can recap or something. I don't know who it is. Okay. Chapter 5, Diagon Alley. And we start with this lovely graphic of a sleeping Hagrid. Harry woke early the next morning. Although he could tell it was daylight, he kept his eyes shut tight. It was a dream, he told himself firmly. I dreamed a giant called Hagrid came to tell me I was going to a school for wizards. When I open my eyes, I'll be at home in my cupboard. There was suddenly a loud tapping noise. And there's Aunt Petunia knocking on the door, Harry thought, his heart sinking. But he still didn't open his eyes. It had been such a good dream. Tap, tap, tap. All right, Harry mumbled. I'm getting up. And Hagrid's heavy coat fell off him. The hut was full of sunlight. The storm was over. Hagrid himself was asleep on the collapsed sofa, and there was an owl rapping its claw on the window, a newspaper held in its beak. Harry scrambled to his feet, so happy he felt as though a large balloon was swelling inside him. He went straight to the window and jerked it open. The owl swooped in and dropped the newspaper on top of Hagrid, who didn't wake up. The owl then fluttered onto the floor and began to attack Hagrid's coat. Don't do that! Harry tried to wave the owl out of the way, but it snapped its beak fiercely at him and carried on savaging the coat. Hagrid, said Harry loudly, there's an owl! Pay him, Hagrid grunted into the sofa. What? He wants payin' for delivering the paper. Look in the pockets. Hagrid's coat seemed to be made of nothing but pockets. Bunches of keys, slug pellets, balls of string, mint humbugs, tea bags. Finally, Harry pulled out a handful of strange-looking coins. Give him 5 nuts, said Hagrid sleepily. Nuts? The little bronze ones. Harry counted out 5 little bronze coins, and the owl held out its legs so he could put the money into a small leather pouch tied to it. Then it flew off through the open window. Hagrid yawned loudly, sat up and stretched. Best be off, Harry. Lots to do today. Gotta get up to London and buy all your stuff for school. Harry was turning over the wizard coins and looking at them. This is Jack's. He had just thought of something which made him feel as though the happy balloon inside him had got a puncture. Hagrid, said Hagrid, who was pulling on his huge boots. I haven't got any money, and you heard Uncle Vernon last night. He won't pay for me to go and learn magic. Don't worry about that, said Hagrid, standing up and scratching his head. Do you think your parents didn't leave you anything? But if their house was destroyed, they didn't keep their gold in their house, boy. Nah, first stop for us is Gringotts, Wizard's Bank. Have a sausage. They're not bad cold, and I wouldn't say no to a bit of your birthday cake, neither. Wizards have banks? Just the one. Gringotts, run by goblins. Harry dropped the bit of sausage he was holding. Goblins? Yeah, so you'd be mad to try to rob it. I'll tell you that. Never mess with goblins, Harry. Gringotts is the safest place in the world for anything you want to keep safe. Except maybe Hogwarts. As a matter of fact, I gotta visit Gringotts anyway, for Dumbledore. Hogwarts business. Hagrid drew himself up proudly. He usually gets me to do something important stuff for him. Fetching you, getting things from Gringotts. Knows he can trust me, see? Got everything? Come on, then. Harry followed Hagrid out onto the rock. The sky was quite clear now, and the sea gleamed in the sunlight. The boat Uncle Vernon had hired was still there, with a lot of water in the bottom after the storm. How did you get here? Harry asked, looking around for another boat. Flew, said Hagrid. Flew? Yeah, but we'll go back in this. Not supposed to use magic now I've got you. They settled down in the boat, Harry still staring at Hagrid, trying to imagine him flying. Seems a shame to row, though, said Hagrid, giving Harry another of his sideways looks. If I was to, speed things up a bit, would you mind not mentioning it at Hogwarts? Of course not, said Harry, eager to see more magic. Hagrid pulled out the pink umbrella again, tapped it twice on the side of the boat, and they sped off toward land. Why would you be mad to try and rob Gringotts? Harry asked. Spells, enchantments, said Hagrid, unfolding his newspaper as he spoke. They say there's a dragon's guard in the high security vaults, and then you gotta find your way. Gringotts is hundreds of miles under London, see? Deep under the underground. You'd die of hunger trying to get out, even if you did manage to get your hands on some. Harry sat and thought about this while Hagrid read his newspaper, The Daily Prophet. Harry had learnt from Uncle Vernon that people liked to be left alone while he did this, but it was very difficult. He'd never had so many questions in his life. The Ministry of Magic, messing things up as usual, Hagrid muttered, turning the page. There's a Ministry of Magic, Harry asked, before he could stop himself. Of course, said Hagrid. They wanted Dumbledore for Minister, of course, but he'd never leave Hogwarts. Just give you a shot of this page before I turn it. Oops. But he'd never leave Hogwarts, so old Cornelius, Fudge, got the job. Bungler if ever there was one, so he pelts Dumbledore with owls every morning asking for advice. But what does the Ministry of Magic do? Well, their main job is to keep it from the muggles if there's still witches and wizards up and down the country. Why? Why? Blimey, Harry. Everyone would want magic solutions to their problems. Now we're best left alone. At this moment, the boat bumped gently into the harbor wall. Hagrid folded up his newspaper, and they clambered up the stone steps onto the street. Passers-by stared aloud at Hagrid as they walked through the little town to the station. Harry couldn't blame them. Not only was Hagrid twice as tall as anyone else, he kept pointing at perfectly ordinary things like parking meters and saying loudly, See that, Harry? Things these muggles dream up, eh? Wow. There's a lot happening on this chat. Justin did a Hagrid last week? I don't remember this.
I didn't.
I don't know what's happening.
That's not a real thing.
Okay. Hagrid, said Harry, panting a bit as he ran to keep up. Did you say there are dragons at Gringotts? Well, so they say, said Hagrid. Crikey, I'd like a dragon. You'd like one? Wanted one ever since I was a kid. Here we go.
I did do that.
Oh, that's funny. He is a terrible Hagrid.
No, my Hagrid was better than yours.
My Hagrid is sounding Irish, which is unfortunate, but I need to practice it. But your Hagrid is really, really bad.
My Hagrid is better than yours.
Yours doesn't even sound like any nationality.
Jason just told you that my Hagrid was better than yours.
He hasn't heard enough of it.
You just don't like giving me credit, but I'm the shit.
You are the worst at accents of anybody I've ever heard.
Yes, but if I try and sound like Aragog, I do a pretty good Hagrid.
They had reached the station. There was a train to London in 5 minutes' time. Hagrid, who didn't understand muggle money, as he called it, gave the notes to Harry so he could buy their tickets. People stared more than ever on the train. Hagrid took up 2 seats and sat knitting what looked like a canary yellow circus tent. Still got your letter, Harry? He asked as he counted stitches. Harry took the parchment envelope out of his pocket. Good, said Hagrid. There's a list there of everything you need. Harry unfolded a second piece of paper he hadn't noticed the night before and read, Hogwarts School of Witchcraft and Wizardry. Uniform. First-year students will require 3 sets of plain work robes, black, 1 plain pointed hat, black for day wear, 1 pair of protective gloves, dragon hide or similar, 1 winter cloak, black, silver fastenings. Please note that all pupils' clothes should carry name tags. Set books. All students should have a copy of each of the following. The Standard Book of Spells, Grade 1, by Miranda Goshawk. A History of Magic by Matilda Bagshot, Magical Theory by Adalbert Waffling, A Beginner's Guide to Transfiguration by Emmerich Switch, 1000 Magical Herbs and Fungi by Philida Spore, Magical Drafts and Potions by Arsenius Jigger, Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them by Newt Scamander, The Dark Forces, A Guide to Self-Protection by Quentin Trimble. Other equipment: 1 wand, 1 cauldron, pewter standard size 2, 1 set glass or crystal vials, 1 telescope, 1 set brass scales. Students may also bring an owl or a cat or a toad. Parents are reminded that first years are not allowed their own broomsticks. Can we buy all this in London? Harry wondered aloud. If you know where to go, said Hagrid. Harry had never been to London before. Although Hagrid seemed to know where he was going, he was obviously not used to getting there in an ordinary way. He got stuck in the ticket barrier on the Underground and complained loudly that the seats were too small and the trains too slow. I don't know how the Muggles manage without magic, he said as they climbed a broken-down escalator which led up to a bustling road lined with shops. Hagrid was so huge that he parted the crowd easily. All Harry had to do was keep close behind him. They passed bookshops and music stores, hamburger bars, and cinemas, but nowhere that looked as if it could sell you a magic wand. This was just an ordinary street full of ordinary people. Could there really be piles of wizard gold buried miles beneath them? Were there really shops that sold spellbooks and broomsticks? Might this not all be some huge joke that the Dursleys had cooked up? If Harry hadn't known that the Dursleys had no sense of humor, he might have thought so. Yet somehow, even though everything Hagrid had told him so far was unbelievable, Harry couldn't help trusting him. This is it, said Hagrid, coming to a halt. The Leaky Cauldron. It's a famous place. It was a tiny, grubby-looking pub. If Hagrid hadn't pointed it out, Harry wouldn't have noticed it was there. The people hurrying by didn't glance at it. Their eyes slid from the big bookshop on one side to the record shop on the other, as if they couldn't see the Leaky Cauldron at all. In fact, Harry had the most peculiar feeling that only he and Hagrid could see it. Before he could mention this, Hagrid had steered him inside. For a famous place, it was very dark and shabby. A few old women were sitting in a corner drinking tiny glasses of sherry. One of them was smoking a long pipe. A little man in a top hat was talking to the old barman, who was quite bald and looked like a gummy walnut. The low buzz of chatter stopped when they walked in. Everyone seemed to know Hagrid. They waved and smiled at him, and the barman reached for a glass, saying, "The usual, Hagrid?" "Can't, Tom. I'm on Hogwarts business," said Hagrid, clapping his great hand on Harry's shoulder and making Harry's knees buckle. "Good Lord," said the barman, peering at Harry. Can this be?" The Leaky Cauldron had suddenly gone completely still and silent. "Bless my soul," whispered the old barman. "Harry Potter. What an honor!" He hurried out from behind the bar, rushed towards Harry, and seized his hand, tears in his eyes. "Welcome back, Mr. Potter. Welcome back." Harry didn't know what to say. Everyone was looking at him. The old woman with the pipe was puffing on it without realizing it had gone out. Hagrid was beaming. Then there was a great scraping of chairs, and next moment Harry found himself shaking hands with everyone in the Leaky Cauldron. "Doris Crockford, Mr. Potter. Can't believe I'm meeting you at last." "So proud, Mr. Potter. I'm just so proud. I always wanted to shake your hand. I'm all of a flutter." "Delighted, Mr. Potter. Just can't tell you. Diggle's the name. Daedalus Diggle." "I've seen you before," said Harry, as Daedalus Diggle's top hat fell off in his excitement. "You bowed to me once in a shop." "He remembers!" cried Daedalus Diggle, looking around at everyone. "Did you hear that? He remembers me." Harry shook hands again and again. Doris Crockford kept coming back for more. A pale young man made his way forward very nervously. One of his eyes was twitching. "Professor Quirrell," said Hagrid. "Harry, Professor Quirrell will be one of your teachers at Hogwarts." "Potter," stammered Professor Quirrell, grasping Harry's hand. "Can't tell you how pleased I am to meet you." "What sort of magic do you teach, Professor Quirrell?" Defense against the dark arts," muttered Professor Quirrell, as though he'd rather not think about it. "Not that you need it, Potter," he laughed nervously. "You'll be getting all your equipment, I suppose? I've got to pick up a new book on vampires myself." He looked terrified at the very thought. But the others wouldn't let Professor Quirrell keep Harry to himself. It took almost 10 minutes to get away from them at all. At last, Hagrid managed to make himself heard over the babble. "Must get on. Lots to buy. Come on, Harry." Doris Crockford shook Harry's hand one last time, and Hagrid led them through the bar and out into a small walled courtyard, where there was nothing but a dustbin and a few weeds. Hagrid grinned at Harry. "Told you, didn't I? Told you he was famous. Even Professor Quirrell was trembling to meet you. Mind you, he's usually trembling." "Is he always that nervous?" "Oh, yeah, poor bloke. Brilliant mind. He was fine while he was studying out of books, but then he took a year off to get some first-hand experience. They say vampires in the Black Forest, and there was nasty bit of trouble with a hag. Never been the same since. Scared of the students, scared of his own subject. Now where's me umbrella? Vampires? Hags? Harry's head was swimming. Hagrid, meanwhile, was counting bricks in the wall above the dustbin. 3 up, 2 across, he muttered. Right, stand back, Harry. He tapped the wall 3 times with the point of his umbrella. The brick he had touched quivered. It wriggled. In the middle, a small hole appeared. It grew wider and wider. A second later, they were facing an archway large enough for Hagrid, an archway onto a cobbled street which twisted and turned out of sight. Welcome, said Hagrid, to Diagon Alley. He grinned at Harry's amazement. I'm gonna show you that this is Diagon Alley. He grinned at Harry's amazement. They stepped through the archway. Harry looked quickly over his shoulder and saw the archway shrink instantly back into solid wall. The sun shone brightly on a stack of cauldrons outside the nearest shop. Cauldrons, all sizes, copper, brass, pewter, silver, self-stirring, collapsible, and a sign hanging over them. There's more on this page. Yeah, you'll be needing one, said Hagrid. But we gotta get your money first. Harry wished he had about 8 more eyes. He turned his head in every direction as they walked up the street, trying to look at everything at once. The shops, the things outside them, the people doing their shopping. A plump woman outside an apothecary's was shaking her head as they passed, saying, Dragon liver, 16 sickles an ounce, they're mad. A low, soft hooting came from a dark shop with a sign saying, Aelops Owl Emporium, tawny, screech, barn, brown, and snowy. Several boys of about Harry's age had their noses pressed against a window with broomsticks in it. Look, Harry heard one of them say, the new Nimbus 2000! Fastest ever! There were shops selling robes, shops selling telescopes, and strange silver instruments Harry had never seen before. Windows stacked with barrels of bat spleens and eel's eyes, tottering piles of spell books, quills and rolls of parchment, potion bottles, globes of the moon. If you guys can hear my cat, I'm sorry. He does this a lot now. I don't know why. Gringotts, said Hagrid. They had reached a snowy white building which towered over the other little shops. Standing beside its burnished bronze doors, wearing a uniform of scarlet and gold, was... Yeah, it's a goblin, said Hagrid quietly as they walked up the white stone steps toward him. The goblin was about a head shorter than Harry. He had a swarthy, clever face, a pointed beard, and Harry noticed very long fingers and feet. He bowed as they walked inside. Now they were facing a second pair of doors, silver this time, with words engraved upon them. Enter, stranger, but take heed of what awaits the sin of greed. For those who take but do not earn must pay most dearly in their turn. So if you seek beneath our floors a treasure that was never yours, thief, you have been warned, beware of finding more than treasure there. Like I said, he'd be mad to try and rob it, said Hagrid. A pair of goblins bowed them through the silver doors, and they were in a vast marble hall. About 100 more goblins were sitting on high stools behind a long counter, scribbling in large ledgers, weighing coins on brass scales, examining precious stones through eyeglasses. There were too many doors to count leading off the hall, and yet more goblins were showing people in and out of these. Hagrid and Harry made for the counter. Mornin', said Hagrid to a free goblin. We've come to take some money out of Mr. Harry Potter's safe. You have his key, sir. Got it here somewhere, said Hagrid, and he started emptying his pockets onto the counter, scattering a handful of moldy dog biscuits over the goblin's book of numbers. The goblin wrinkled his nose. Harry watched the goblin on their right, weighing a pile of rubies as big as glowing coals. Got it, said Hagrid at last, holding up a tiny golden key. The goblin looked at it closely. That seems to be in order. And I've also got a letter here from Professor Dumbledore, said Hagrid importantly, throwing out his chest. It's about the you-know-what in Vault 713. The goblin read the letter carefully. Very well, he said, handing it back to Hagrid. I will have someone take you down to both vaults. Griphook? Griphook was yet another goblin. Once Hagrid had crammed all the dog biscuits back inside his pockets, he and Harry followed Griphook towards one of the doors leading off the hall. What's the you-know-what in Vault 713? Harry asked. Can't tell you that, said Hagrid mysteriously. Very secret Hogwarts business. Dumbledore trusted me. More than my job's worth to tell you that. Griphook held the door open for them. Harry, who had expected more marble, was surprised. They were in a narrow stone passageway lit with flaming torches. It sloped steeply downwards, and there were little railway tracks on the floor. Griphook whistled, and a small cart came hurtling up the tracks toward them. They climbed in, Hagrid with some difficulty, and were off. At first they just hurtled through a maze of twisting passages. Harry tried to remember. Left, right, left, middle fork, right, left, but it was impossible. The rattling cart seemed to know its own way, because Griphook wasn't steering. Harry's eyes stung as the cold air rushed past them, but he kept them wide open. Once he thought he saw a burst of fire at the end of a passage, and twisted around to see if it was a dragon, but too late. They plunged even deeper, passing an underground lake where huge stalactites and stalagmites grew from the ceiling and floor. "I never know," Harry called to Hagrid over the noise of the cart. "What's the difference between a stalagmite and a stalactite?" "Stalagmite's got an M in it," said Hagrid, "and don't ask me questions just now. I think I'm going to be sick." He did look very green, and when the cart stopped at last beside a small door in the passage wall, Hagrid got out and had to lean against the wall to stop his knees trembling. Griphook unlocked the door. A lot of green smoke came billowing out, and as it cleared, Harry gasped. Inside were mounds of gold coins, columns of silver, heaps of little bronze nuts. "All yours," smiled Hagrid. "All Harry's." It was incredible. The Dursleys couldn't have known about this, or they'd have had it from him faster than blinking. How often had they complained how much Harry cost them to keep? And all the time there had been a small fortune belonging to him buried deep under London. Hagrid helped Harry pile some of it into a bag. "The gold ones are galleons," he explained. 17 silver sickles to a galleon, and 29 nuts to a sickle. It's easy enough. Right, that should be enough for a couple of terms. We'll keep the rest safe for you. He turned to Griphook. "Vault 713 now, please, and can we go more slowly?" "One speed only," said Griphook. My cat is attacking the string. It's kind of a hassle. Sorry, a sec. They were going even deeper now and gathering speed. The air became colder and colder as they hurtled round tight corners. They went rattling over an underground ravine, and Harry leant over the side to try and see what was down at the dark bottom, but Hagrid groaned and pulled him back by the scruff of his neck. Vault 713 had no keyhole. "Stand back," said Griphook importantly. He stroked the door gently with one of his long fingers, and it simply melted away. "If anyone but a Gringotts goblet tried that, they'd be sucked through the door and trapped in there," said Griphook. "How often do you check to see if anyone's inside?" Harry asked. "About once every 10 years," said Griphook with a rather nasty grin. Something really extraordinary had to be inside this top security vault, Harry was sure, and he leant forward eagerly, expecting to see fabulous jewels at the very least, but at first he thought it was empty. Then he noticed a grubby little package wrapped in brown paper lying on the floor. Hagrid picked it up and tucked it deep inside his coat. Harry longed to know what it was, but knew better than to ask. "Come on, back in this infernal cart, and don't talk to me on the way back. It's best if I keep my mouth shut," said Hagrid. One wild cart ride later, they stood blinking in the sunlight outside Gringotts. Harry didn't know where to run first now that he had a bag full of money. He didn't have to know how many galleons there were to a pound to know he was holding more money than he'd had in his whole life. More money than even Dudley had ever had. "Might as well get your uniform," said Hagrid, nodding towards Madame Malkin's robes for all occasions. "Listen, Harry, would you mind if I slipped off for a pick-me-up in the leaky cauldron? I hate them Gringotts carts." He did still look a bit sick, so Harry entered Madame Malkin's shop alone, feeling nervous. Madame Malkin was a squat, smiling witch dressed all in mauve. "Hogwarts, dear," she said when Harry started to speak. "Got the lot here. Another young man being fitted up just now, in fact." In the back of the shop, a boy with a pale, pointed face was standing on a footstool, while a second witch pinned up his long black robes. Madame Malkin stood Harry on a stool next to him, slipped a long robe over his head, and began to pin it to the right length. I'm just going to show you a picture of the other boy who's currently being fitted. Some of you already know his name. "Hello," said the boy. "Hogwarts too?" "Yes," said Harry. "My father's next door buying my books, and mother's up the street looking at wands," said the boy. He had a bored, drawling voice. "Then I'm going to drag them off to look at racing brooms. I don't see why first years can't have their own. I think I'll bully father into getting me one, and I'll smuggle it in somehow." Harry was strongly reminded of Dudley. "Have you got your own broom?" the boy went on. "No," said Harry. "Play Quidditch at all?" "No," Harry said again, wondering what on earth Quidditch could be. "I do. Father says it's a crime if I'm not picked to play for my house, and I must say I agree. Know what house you'll be in yet?" "No," said Harry, feeling more stupid by the minute. "Well, no one really knows until they get there, do they? But I know I'll be in Slytherin. All our family have been. Imagine being in Hufflepuff. I think I'd leave, wouldn't you?" Said Harry, wishing he could say something a bit more interesting. "I say, look at that man," said the boy suddenly, nodding towards the front window. Hagrid was standing there grinning at Harry and pointing at 2 large ice creams to show he couldn't come in. "That's Hagrid," said Harry, pleased to know something the boy didn't. "He works at Hogwarts." "Oh," said the boy. "I've heard of him. He's a sort of servant, isn't he?" He's the gamekeeper, said Harry. He was liking the boy less and less every second. Yes, exactly. I heard he's a sort of savage, lives in a hut in the school grounds, and every now and then he gets drunk, tries to do magic, and ends up setting fire to his bed. Who's tail growth? Just wondering in the chat here. I think he's brilliant, said Harry coldly. Do you? Said the boy, with a slight sneer. Why is he with you? Where are your parents? Oh, hi, Eric. They're dead, said Harry shortly. He didn't feel much like going into the matter with this boy. Oh, sorry, said the other, not sounding sorry at all. But they were our kind, weren't they? They were a witch and wizard, if that's what you mean. I really don't think they should let the other sort in, do you? They're just not the same. They've never been brought up to know our ways. Some of them have never even heard of Hogwarts until they get the letter, imagine. I think they should keep it in the old wizarding families. What's your surname, anyway? Before Harry could answer, Madame Malkin said, That's you done, my dear. And Harry, not sorry for an excuse to stop talking to the boy, hopped down from the footstool. Well, I'll see you at Hogwarts, I suppose, said the drawling boy. Harry was rather quiet as he ate the ice cream Hagrid had brought him. Chocolate and raspberry with chopped nuts. What's up? Said Hagrid. Nothing, Harry lied. They stopped to buy parchment and quills. Harry teared up a bit when he found a bottle of ink that changed colors as you wrote. When they had left the shop, he said, Hagrid, what's Quidditch? Why, Harry, I keep forgetting how little you know. Not knowing about Quidditch. Don't make me feel worse, said Harry. He told Hagrid about the pale boy and Madame Malkin's. And he said people from Muggle families shouldn't even be allowed in. You're not from a Muggle family. If he'd known who you were, he's grown up knowing your name if his parents are wizard folk. You saw him in the leaky cauldron. Anyway, what does he know about some of the best I ever saw were the only ones with magic in them in a long line of muggles? Look at your mum. Look what she had first, sister. So, what is Quidditch? It's our sport, wizard sport. It's like football in the muggle world. Everyone follows Quidditch, played up in the air on broomsticks, and there's 4 balls. Sort of hard to explain the rules. And what are Slytherin and Hufflepuff? Schoolhouses. There's 4. Everyone says Hufflepuff are a lot of duffers, but I bet I'm in Hufflepuff, said Harry Potter gloomily. Better Hufflepuff than Slytherin, said Hagrid darkly. There's not a single witch or wizard who went bad who wasn't in Slytherin. You know who was one. Well, sorry. You know who was at Hogwarts? Years and years ago, said Hagrid. They bought Harry's school books in a shop called Flourish and Blots, where the shelves were stacked to the ceiling with books as large as paving stones bound in leather. Books the size of postage stamps and covers of silk. Books full of peculiar symbols and a few books with nothing in them at all. Even Dudley, who never read anything, would have been wild to get his hands on some of these. Hagrid almost had to drag Harry away from curses and counter-curses. Bewitch your friends and befuddle your enemies with the latest revenges. Hair loss, jelly legs, tongue-tying, and much, much more. By Professor Vindictus Viridian. I was trying to find out how to curse Dudley. I'm not saying that's not a good idea, but you're not to use magic in the Muggle world, except in very special occasions, said Hagrid. And anyway, you couldn't work any of them curses yet. You'll need a lot more study before you get to that level. Hagrid wouldn't let Harry buy a solid gold cauldron either. It says future on your list. But they got a nice set of scales for weighing potion ingredients, and a collapsible brass telescope. Then they visited the apothecary's, which was fascinating enough to make up for its horrible smell, a mixture of bad eggs and rotted cabbages. Barrels of slimy stuff stood on the floor. Jars of herbs, dried roots, and bright powders lined the walls. Bundles of feathers, strings of fangs, and snarled claws hung from the ceiling. While Hagrid asked the man behind the counter for a supply of some basic potion ingredients for Harry, Harry himself examined silver unicorn horns at 21 galleons each, and minuscule, glittery black beetle eyes, 5 nuts a scoop. Outside the apothecary's, Hagrid checked Harry's list again. Just your wand left. Oh yeah, and I still haven't gotten you a birthday present. Harry felt himself go red. You don't have to. I know I don't have to. Tell you what, I'll get your animal. Not a toad. Toads went out of fashion years ago. You'd be laughed at. And I don't like cats. They make me sneeze. I'll get you an owl. All the kids want owls. They're dead useful. Carry your post and everything. 20 minutes later, they left Ilop's Owl Emporium, which had been dark and full of rustling and flickering, jewel-bright eyes. Harry now carried a large cage which held a beautiful snowy owl, fast asleep with her head under her wing. He couldn't stop stammering his thanks, sounding just like Professor Quirrell. "Don't mention it," said Hagrid gruffly. "Don't expect you've had a lot of presents from them Dursleys. Just Ollivanders left now. Only place for wands, Ollivanders, and you gotta have the best wand." A magic wand. This was what Harry had been really looking forward to. The last shop was narrow and shabby. Healing gold letters over the door read Ollivanders, makers of fine wands since 382 BC. A single wand lay on a faded purple cushion in the dusty window. A tinkling bell rang somewhere in the depths of the shop as they stepped inside. It was a tiny place, empty except for a single spindly chair which Hagrid sat on to wait. Harry felt strangely as though he had entered a very strict library. He swallowed a lot of new questions which had just occurred to him, and looked instead at the thousands of narrow boxes piled neatly right up to the ceiling. For some reason the back of his neck prickled. The very dust and silence in here seemed to tingle with some secret magic. "Good afternoon," said a soft voice. Harry jumped. Hagrid must have jumped too, because there was a loud crunching noise, and he got quickly off the spindly chair. An old man was standing before them, his wide, pale eyes shining like moons through the gloom of the shop. "Hello," said Harry awkwardly. "Ah, yes," said the man. Yes. I thought I'd be seeing you soon, Harry Potter." It wasn't a question. "You have your mother's eyes. It seems only yesterday she was in here herself, buying her first wand. 10 1/4 inches long, swishy, made of willow. Nice wand for charm work." Mr. Ollivander moved closer to Harry. Harry wished he would blink. Those silvery eyes were a bit creepy. "Your father, on the other hand, favored a mahogany wand. 11 inches, pliable, a little more power, and excellent for transfiguration. But I say your father favored it. It's really the wand that chooses the wizard, of course." Mr. Ollivander had come so close that he and Harry were almost nose to nose. Harry could see himself reflected in those misty eyes. "And that's where—" Mr. Ollivander touched the lightning scar on Harry's forehead with a long white finger. "I'm sorry to say I sold the wand that did it," he said softly. 13 1/2 inches. Powerful wand, very powerful, and in the wrong hands. Well, if I'd known what that wand was going out into the world to do—" He shook his head, and then to Harry's relief spotted Hagrid. Rubius Hagrid! How nice to see you again. Oak, 16 inches. Rather bendy, wasn't it?" "It was, sir, yes," said Hagrid. "Good wand, that one. But I suppose they snapped it in half when you got expelled," said Mr. Ollivander, suddenly stern. Yes, they did, yes," said Hagrid, shuffling his feet. I still got the pieces, though," he added brightly. "But you don't use them," said Mr. Ollivander sharply. "Oh, no, sir," said Hagrid quickly. Harry noticed he gripped his pink umbrella very tightly as he spoke. Said Mr. Ollivander, giving Hagrid a piercing look. "Well now, Mr. Potter, let me see." He pulled a long tape measure with silver markings out of his pocket. "Which is your wand arm?" Well, I'm right-handed," said Harry. "Hold out your arm. That's it." He measured Harry from shoulder to finger, then wrist to elbow, shoulder to floor, knee to armpit, and round his head. As he measured, he said, "Every Ollivander wand has a core of a powerful magical substance. Mr. Potter, we use unicorn hairs, phoenix tail feathers, and the heartstrings of dragons. No two Ollivander wands are the same, just as no two unicorns, dragons, or phoenixes are quite the same. And of course you will never get such good results with another wizard's wand." Harry suddenly realized that the tape measure was measuring between his nostrils, was doing this on its own. Mr. Ollivander was flitting around the shelves, taking down boxes. "That will do," he said, and the tape measure crumpled into a heap on the floor. "Right then, Mr. Potter, try this one. Beech wood and dragon heartstring, 9 inches. Nice and flexible. Just take it and give it a wave." Harry took the wand, and feeling foolish, waved it around a bit, but Mr. Ollivander snatched it out of his hand almost at once. "Maple and phoenix feather, 7 inches. White whippy, try—" Harry tried, but he had hardly raised the wand when it too was snatched back by Mr. Ollivander. No, here. Ebony and unicorn hair, 8 1/2 inches, springy. Go on, try it out." Harry tried and tried. He had no idea what Mr. Ollivander was waiting for. The pile of tried wands was mounting higher and higher in the spindly chair, but the more wands Mr. Ollivander pulled from the shelves, the happier he seemed to become. "Tricky customer, eh? Not to worry. We'll find the perfect match here somewhere. I wonder. Now, yes, why not? Unusual combination. Holly and phoenix feather. 11 inches, nice and supple." Harry took the wand. He felt a sudden warmth in his fingers. He raised the wand above his head, brought it swishing down through the dusty air, and a stream of red and gold sparks shot from the end like a firework, throwing dancing spots of light onto the walls. Hagrid whooped and clapped. Mr. Ollivander cried, "Oh, bravo! Yes, indeed! Oh, very good. Well, how curious. How very curious." He put Harry's wand back into its box and wrapped it in brown paper, still muttering, "Curious, curious." "Sorry," said Harry, "but what's curious?" Mr. Ollivander fixed Harry with his pale stare. "I remember every wand I've ever sold, Mr. Potter. Every single wand. It so happens that the phoenix whose tail feather is in your wand gave another feather. Just one other. It is very curious. Sorry, I lost my place. It is very curious indeed that you should be destined for this wand when its brother, gave you that scar." Harry swallowed. "Yes, 13.5 inches. You. Curious indeed how these things happen. The wand chooses the wizard, remember. I think we must expect great things from you, Mr. Potter. After all, he who must not be named did great things. Terrible, yes, but great." Harry shivered. He wasn't sure he liked Mr. Ollivander too much. He paid 7 gold galleons for his wand, and Mr. Ollivander bowed them from his shop. The late afternoon sun hung low in the sky. As Harry and Hagrid made their way back down Diagon Alley, back through the wall, back through the leaky cauldron, now empty, Harry didn't speak at all as they walked down the road. Sorry. He didn't even notice how much people were gawping at them on the underground, laden as they were with all their funny-shaped packages, with the sleeping snowy owl on Harry's lap. Up another escalator, out into Paddington Station, Harry only realized where they were when Hagrid tapped him on the shoulder. "Got time for a bite to eat before your train leaves," he said. He bought Harry a hamburger, and they sat down in plastic seats to eat them. Harry kept looking around. Everything looked so strange somehow. "You all right, Harry? You're very quiet," said Hagrid. Harry wasn't sure he could explain. He'd just had the best birthday of his life, and yet he chewed his hamburger, trying to find the words. "Everyone thinks I'm special," he said at last. "All those people in the leaky cauldron, Professor Quell, Mr. Ollivander, but I don't know anything about magic at all. How can they expect great things? I'm famous, and I can't even remember what I'm famous for. I don't know what happened when the night my parents died." Hagrid leaned across the table. Behind the wild beard and eyebrows he wore a very kind smile. "Don't you worry, Harry. You'll learn fast enough. Everyone starts at the beginning at Hogwarts. You'll be just fine. Just be yourself. I know it's hard. You've been singled out, and that's always hard. But you'll have a great time at Hogwarts. I did. Still do, as a matter of fact." Hagrid helped Harry onto the train that would take him back to the Dursleys, then handed him an envelope. "Your ticket for Hogwarts," he said. "1st of September, King's Cross. It's all on your ticket. Any problems with the Dursleys, send me a letter with your owl. She'll know where to find me. See you soon, Harry." The train pulled out of the station. Harry wanted to watch Hagrid until he was out of sight. He rose in his seat and pressed his nose against the window, but he blinked and Hagrid had gone. Sorry. I'm just trying to clear my throat a little bit. I think Justin is sleeping behind me. But what time is it? It's 9:39. That chapter was longer than the last couple that we've read. Do you guys feel like doing another? Yay or nay? We are about to go on the Hogwarts Express, if that helps sway your decision. Nobody's answering. I'm gonna just keep going if you guys don't answer. Cool. I'm gonna just keep going. Chapter 6, The Journey from Platform 9 3/4. Harry's last month with the Dursleys wasn't fun. True, Dudley was now so scared of Harry he wouldn't stay in the same room, while Aunt Petunia and Uncle Vernon didn't shut Harry in his cupboard, force him to do anything, or shout at him. In fact, they didn't speak to him at all. Half terrified, half furious, they acted as though any chair with Harry in it was empty. Although this was an improvement in many ways, it did become a bit depressing after a while. Harry kept to his room with his new owl for company. He had decided to call her Hedwig, a name he had found in a history of magic. His school books were very interesting. He lay on his bed reading late into the night, Hedwig swooping in and out of the open windows as she pleased. It was lucky that Aunt Petunia didn't come in to hoover anymore, because Hedwig kept bringing back dead mice. Every night before he went to sleep, Harry ticked off another day on the piece of paper he had pinned to the wall, counting down to September the 1st. On the last day of August, he thought he'd better speak to his aunt and uncle about getting to King's Cross Station next day, so he went down to the living room where they were watching a quiz show on television. He cleared his throat to let them know he was there, and Dudley screamed and ran from the room. Uncle Vernon?" Uncle Vernon grunted to show he was listening. I need to be at King's Cross tomorrow to go to Hogwarts." Uncle Vernon grunted again. "Would it be all right if you gave me a lift?" Grunt. Harry supposed that meant yes. "Thank you." He was about to go back upstairs when Uncle Vernon actually spoke. Funny way to get to a wizard's school, the train. Magic carpets all got punctures, have they? Harry didn't say anything. Where is the school, anyway? I don't know, said Harry, realizing this for the first time. He pulled the ticket Hagrid had given him out of his pocket. I just take the train from platform 9 3/4 at 11 o'clock, he read. His aunt and uncle stared. Platform what? 9 3/4. Don't talk rubbish, said Uncle Vernon. There is no platform 9 3/4. It's on my ticket. Barking, said Uncle Vernon. Howling mad, the lot of them. You'll see. You just wait. All right, we'll take you to King's Cross. We're going up to London tomorrow anyways, or I wouldn't bother. Why are you going to London? Harry asked, trying to keep things friendly. Taking Dudley to hospital, growled Uncle Vernon. Got to have that ruddy tail removed before he goes to Smeltings. Harry woke at 5 o'clock the next morning, and was too excited and nervous to go back to sleep. He got up and pulled on his jeans because he didn't want to walk into the station in his wizard's robes. He'd change on the train. He checked his Hogwarts list yet again to make sure he had everything he needed, saw that Hedwig was shut safely in her cage, and then paced to the room, waiting for the Dursleys to get up. 2 hours later, Harry's huge, heavy trunk had been loaded into the Dursleys' car. Aunt Petunia had talked Dudley into sitting next to Harry, and they had set off. They reached King's Cross at 10:30. Uncle Vernon dumped Harry's trunk onto a trolley and wheeled it into the station for him. Harry thought this was strangely kind until Uncle Vernon stopped dead, facing the platforms with a nasty grin on his face. Well, there you are, boy. Platform 9, platform 10. Your platform should be somewhere in the middle, but they don't seem to have built it yet, do they? He was quite right, of course. There was a big plastic number 9 over one platform, and a big plastic number 10 over the other next to it, and in the middle, nothing at all. Have a good term, said Uncle Vernon with an even nastier smile. He left without another word. Harry turned and saw the Dursleys drive away. All 3 of them were laughing. Harry's mouth went rather dry. What on earth was he going to do? He was starting to attract a lot of funny looks because of Hedwig. He'd have to ask someone. He stopped a passing guard, but didn't dare mention platform 9 3/4. The guard had never heard of Hogwarts, and when Harry couldn't even tell him what part of the country it was in, he started to get annoyed, as though Harry was being stupid on purpose. Getting desperate, Harry asked for the train that left at 11 o'clock, but the guard said there wasn't one. In the end, the guard strode away, muttering about time wasters. Harry was now trying hard not to panic. According to the large clock over the arrivals board, he had 10 minutes left to get on the train to Hogwarts, and he had no idea how to do it. He was stranded in the middle of a station with a trunk he could hardly lift, a pocket full of wizard money, and a large owl. Hagrid must have forgotten to tell him something you had to do, like tapping the third brick on the left to get into Diagon Alley. He wondered if he should get out his wand and start tapping the ticket box between platforms 9 and 10. At that moment, a group of people passed just behind him, and he caught a few words of what they were saying. Packed with muggles, of course. Harry swung round. The speaker was a plump woman who was talking to 4 boys, all with flaming red hair. Each of them was pushing a trunk like Harry's in front of him, and they had an owl. Heart hammering, Harry pushed his trolley after them. They stopped, and so did he, just near enough to hear what they were saying. Now, what's the platform number? Said the boy's mother. 9 3/4, piped a small girl, also red-headed, who was holding her hand. Mom, can't I go? You're not old enough, Ginny. Now be quiet. All right, Percy, you go first. What looked like the oldest boy marched towards platforms 9 and 10. Harry watched, careful not to blink in case he missed it. But just as the boy reached the divide between the 2 platforms, a large crowd of tourists came swarming in front of him, and by the time the last rucksack had cleared away, the boy had vanished. Fred, you next, the plump woman said. I'm not Fred. I'm George, said the boy. Honestly, woman, call yourself our mother. Can't you tell I'm George? Sorry, George, dear. Only joking, I am Fred, said the boy, and off he went. His twin called after him to hurry up, and he must have done, because a second later he had gone. But how had he done it? Now the third brother was walking briskly towards the ticket barrier. He was almost there, and then quite suddenly he wasn't anywhere. There was nothing else for it. Excuse me, Harry said to the plump woman. Hello, dear, she said. First time at Hogwarts? Ron's new, too. She pointed to the last and youngest of her sons. He was tall, thin, and gangling, with freckles, big hands and feet, and a long nose. Yes, said Harry. The thing is, I don't know how to get onto the platform, she said kindly, and Harry nodded. Not to worry, she said. All you have to do is walk straight to the barrier between platforms 9 and 10. Don't stop, and don't be scared you'll crash into it. That's very important. Best do it at a bit of a run if you're nervous. Go on. Go now before Ron. Okay, said Harry. He pushed his trolley round, stared at the barrier. It looked very solid. He started to walk towards it. People jostled him on their ways to the platforms 9 and 10. Harry walked more quickly. He was going to smash right into that ticket box, and then he'd be in trouble. Leaning forward on his trolley, he broke into a heavy run. The barrier was coming nearer and nearer. He wouldn't be able to stop. The trolley was out of control. He was a foot away. He closed his eyes, ready for the crash. It didn't come. He kept on running. He opened his eyes. A scarlet steam engine was waiting next to a platform packed with people. A sign overhead said, Hogwarts Express, 11 o'clock. Harry looked behind him and saw a wrought iron archway where the ticket box had been, with the words Platform 9 3/4 on it. He had done it. Smoke from the engine drifted over the heads of the chattering crowd, while cats of every color wound here and there between their legs. Owls hooted to each other in a disgruntled sort of way over the babble and the scraping of heavy trunks. The first few carriages were already packed with students, some hanging out of the windows to talk to their families, some fighting over seats. Harry pushed his trolley off down the platform in search of an empty seat. He passed a round-faced boy who was saying, Gran, I've lost my toad again. Oh, Neville, he heard the old woman sigh. A boy with dreadlocks was surrounded by a small crowd. Give us a look, Lee, go on. The boy lifted the lid of a box in his arms, and the people around him shrieked and yelled as something inside poked out a long, hairy leg. Harry pressed on through the crowd until he found an empty compartment near the end of the train. He put Hedwig inside first, and then started to shove the door and heave his trunk towards the train door. Started to shove and heave his trunk toward the train door. He tried to lift it up the steps, but could hardly raise one end, and twice he dropped it painfully on his foot. Want a hand? It was one of the red-haired twins he'd followed through the ticket box. Yes, please, Harry panted. Why, Fred, come here and help. With the twins' help, Harry's trunk was at last tucked away in a corner of the compartment. Thanks, said Harry, pushing his sweaty hair out of his eyes. What's that? Said one of the twins, suddenly pointing at Harry's lightning scar. Blimey, said the other twin. Are you? He is, said the first one. Aren't you? He added to Harry. What? Said Harry. Harry Potter, chorused the twins. Oh, him, said Harry. I mean, yes, I am. The two boys gawped at him, and Harry felt himself going red. Then, to his relief, a voice came floating in through the train's open doors. Fred, George, are you there? Coming, Mum. With a last look at Harry, the twins hopped off the train. Harry sat down next to the window, where, half hidden, he could watch the red-haired family on the platform and hear what they were saying. Their mother had just taken out her handkerchief. Ron, you've got something on your nose. The youngest boy tried to jerk out of the way, but she grabbed him and began rubbing the end of his nose. Mom, get off! He wriggled free. Ah, has Ickle Ronnie got something on his nosy? Said one of the twins. Shut up, said Ron. Where's Percy? Said their mother. He's coming now. The oldest boy came striding into sight. He had already changed into his billowing black Hogwarts robes, and Harry noticed a shiny red and gold badge on his chest with the letter P on it. Can't stay long, Mother, he said. I'm up front. The prefects have got 2 compartments to themselves. Oh, are you a prefect, Percy? Said one of the twins with an air of great surprise. You should have said something. We had no idea. Hang on, I think I remember him saying something about it, said the other twin. Once or twice. A minute. All summer. Oh, shut up, said Percy the prefect. How come Percy gets new robes, anyway? Said one of the twins. Because he's a prefect, said their mother fondly. All right, dear. Well, have a good time. Send me an owl when you get there. Wait, what's silver? Red and gold badge. Just, huh? That's weird, Ra. It should be red and gold because those are Gryffindor's colors. So that's quite strange. All right. Sorry. Now you two. This year you behave yourselves. If I get one more owl telling me you've blown up a toilet or blown up a toilet, we've never blown up a toilet. Great idea though. Thanks, Mum. It's not funny. And look after Ron. Don't worry, Ickle Ronnykins is safe with us. Shut up, said Ron again. He was almost as tall as the twins already, and his nose was still pink where his mother had rubbed it. Hey, Mom, guess what? Guess who we just met on the train? Harry leaned back quickly so they couldn't see him looking. You know that black-haired boy who was near us in the station? Know who he is? Who? Harry Potter. Harry heard the little girl's voice. Oh, Mom, can I go on the train and see him? Mom, oh, please. You've already seen him, Ginny, and the poor boy isn't something you'd goggle at in the zoo. Is he really, Fred? How do you know? Asked him. Saw his scar. It's really there, like lightning. Poor dear. No wonder he was alone. I wondered. He was ever so polite when he asked how to get onto the platform. Never mind that. Do you think he remembers what you-know-who looks like? Their mother suddenly became very stern. I forbid you to ask him, Fred. No, don't you dare. As though he needs reminding of that on his first day at school. All right, keep your hair on. A whistle sounded. Hurry up, their mother said, and the three boys clambered onto the train. They leaned out of the window for her to kiss them goodbye, and their younger sister began to cry. Don't, Ginny, we'll send you loads of owls. We'll send you a Hogwarts toilet seat. George! Only joking, Mum. The train began to move. Harry saw the boy's mother waving and their sister half laughing, half crying, running to keep up with the train until it gathered too much speed. Then she fell back and waved. Harry watched the girl and her mother disappear as the train rounded the corner. This is one of my favorite illustrations. Hold it up better. Houses flashed past the window. Harry felt a great leap of excitement. He didn't know what he was going to, but it had to be better than what he was leaving behind. The door of the compartment slid open, and the youngest red-headed boy came in. Anyone sitting there? He asked, pointing at the seat opposite Harry. Everywhere else is full. Harry shook his head, and the boy sat down. He glanced at Harry and then looked quickly out of the window, pretending he hadn't looked. Harry saw he still had a black mark on his nose. Hey, Ron, the twins were back. Listen, we're going down the middle of the train. Lee Jordan's got a giant tarantula down there. Right, mumbled Ron. Harry, said the other twin, did we introduce ourselves? Fred and George Weasley. And this is Ron, our brother. See you later, then. Bye, said Harry and Ron. The twins slid the compartment door shut behind them. Are you really Harry Potter? Ron blurted out. Harry nodded. Oh, well, I thought it might be one of Fred and George's jokes, said Ron. And have you really got, He pointed at Harry's forehead. Harry pulled back his fringe to show the lightning scar. Ron stared. So that's where you know who... Yes, said Harry, but I can't remember it. Nothing? Said Ron eagerly. Well, I remember a lot of green light, but nothing else. Wow, said Ron. He sat and stared at Harry for a few moments. Then, as though he had suddenly realized what he was doing, he looked quickly out of the window again. Are all your family wizards? Asked Harry, who found Ron just as interesting as Ron found him. Yes, I think so, said Ron. I think Mom's got a second cousin who's an accountant, but we never talk about him. So you must know loads of magic already. The Weasleys were clearly one of those old wizarding families the Pale Boy and Diagon Alley had talked about. I heard you went to live with Muggles, said Ron. What are they like? Horrible. Well, not all of them. My aunt and uncle and cousin are, though. Wish I'd had 3 wizard brothers. 5, said Ron. For some reason he was looking gloomy. I'm the 6th in our family to go to Hogwarts. You could say I've got a lot to live up to. Bill and Charlie have already left. Bill was head boy and Charlie was captain of Quidditch. Now Percy's a prefect. Fred and George mess around a lot, but they still get really good marks, and everyone thinks they're really funny. Everyone expects me to do as well as the others, but if I do, it's no big deal, because they did it first. You never get anything new, either, with 5 brothers. I've got Bill's old robes, Charlie's old wand, and Percy's old rat. Ron reached inside his jacket and pulled out a fat grey rat which was asleep. His name's Scabbers, and he's useless. He hardly ever wakes up. Percy got an owl from my dad for being made a prefect, but I got Scabbers instead. Ron's ears went pink. He seemed to think he'd said too much because he went back to staring out of the window. Harry didn't think there was anything wrong with not being able to afford an owl. After all, he'd never had any money in his life until a month ago, and he told Ron so, all about having to wear Dudley's old clothes and never getting proper birthday presents. This seemed to cheer Ron up. And until Hagrid told me, I didn't know anything about being a wizard, or about my parents, or Voldemort. Ron gasped. What? Said Harry. You said you know whose name, said Ron, sounding both shocked and impressed. I'd have thought you, of all people. I'm not trying to be brave or anything, saying the name, said Harry. I just never knew you shouldn't. See what I mean? I've got loads to learn. I bet, he added, voicing for the first time something that had been worrying him a lot lately. I bet I'm the worst in the class. You won't be. There's loads of people who come from Muggle families, and they learn quick enough. While they had been talking, the train had carried them out of London. Now they were speeding past fields full of cows and sheep. They were quiet for a time, watching the fields and lanes flick past. Around 12:30, there was a great clattering outside in the corridor, and a smiling, dimpled woman slid back their door and said, Anything off the trolley, dears? Harry, who hadn't had any breakfast, leapt to his feet, but Ron's ears went pink again, and he muttered that he'd brought sandwiches. Harry went out into the corridor. He had never had any money for sweets with the Dursleys, and now that he had pockets rattling with gold and silver, he was ready to buy as many Mars bars as he could carry. But the woman didn't have Mars bars. What she did have were Bertie Bott's every flavor beans, Drubel's best blowing gum, chocolate frogs, pumpkin pasties, cauldron cakes, licorice wands, and a number of other strange things Harry had never seen in his life. Not wanting to miss anything, he got some of everything, and paid the woman 11 silver sickles and 7 bronze nuts. Ron stared as Harry brought it all back into the compartment and tipped it onto an empty seat. Hungry, are you? Starving, said Harry, taking a large bite out of a pumpkin pasty. Ron had taken out a lumpy package and unwrapped it. There were 4 sandwiches in there. He pulled one of them apart and said, "She always forgets I don't like corned beef." "Swap you for one of these," said Harry, holding up a pasty. "Go on." "You don't want this. It's all dry," said Ron. "She hasn't got much time," he added quickly. "You know, with 5 of us." "Go on, have a pasty," said Harry, who had never had anything to share before, or indeed anyone to share it with. It was a nice feeling, sitting there with Ron, eating their way through all Harry's pasties and cakes. The sandwiches lay forgotten. "What are these?" asked Harry, holding up a pack of chocolate frogs. "They're not really frogs, are they?" He was starting to feel that nothing would surprise him. "No," said Ron, "but see what the card is. I'm missing Agrippa." "What?" "Oh, of course you wouldn't know. Chocolate frogs have cards inside them. You know, to collect? Famous witches and wizards. I got about 500, but I haven't got Agrippa or Ptolemy." Harry unwrapped his chocolate frog and picked up the card. It showed a man's face. He wore half-moon glasses, had a long crooked nose, and flowing silver hair, beard, and mustache. Underneath the picture was the name Albus Dumbledore. And there is Albus Dumbledore. "So this is Dumbledore," said Harry. "Don't tell me you'd never heard of Dumbledore," said Ron. "Can I have a frog? I might get Agrippa. Thanks." Harry turned over his card and read, "Albus Dumbledore, currently headmaster of Hogwarts, considered by many the greatest wizard of modern times. Professor Dumbledore is particularly famous for his defeat of the dark wizard Grindelwald in 1945, for the discovery of the 12 uses of dragon's blood, and his work on alchemy with his partner Nicholas Flamel. Professor Dumbledore enjoys chamber music and 10-pin bowling." Harry turned the card back over and saw, to his astonishment, that Dumbledore's face had disappeared. "He's gone!" "We can't expect him to hang around all day," said Ron. "He'll be back. Nay, I've got Morgana again, and I've got about 6 of her. Do you want it? You can start collecting." Ron's eyes strayed to the pile of chocolate frogs waiting to be unwrapped. "Help yourself," said Harry, "but in, the Muggle world, people just stay put in photos." "Do they? What, they don't move at all?" Ron sounded amazed. "Weird." Harry stared as Dumbledore sidled back into the picture and his card and gave him a small smile. Ron was more interested in eating the frogs than looking at the famous witches and wizard cards, but Harry couldn't keep his eyes off them. Soon he had not only Dumbledore and Morgana, but Hengist of Woodcroft, Alberic Grunion, Circe, Paracelsus, and Merlin. He finally tore his eyes away from the druidess Cleodna, who was scratching her nose to open a bag of Bertie Bott's every-flavored beans. "You want to be careful with those," Ron warned Harry. "When they say every flavor, they mean every flavor. You get all the ordinary ones like chocolate and peppermint and marmalade, but then you can get spinach and liver and tripe. George reckons he had a bogey-flavored one once." Ron picked up a green bean, looked at it carefully, and bit into a corner. "Plarg, see? Sprouts." They had a good time eating the every-flavored beans. Harry got toast, coconut, baked bean, strawberry, curry, grass, coffee, sardine, and was even brave enough to nibble on the end of a funny gray one Ron wouldn't touch, which turned out to be pepper. The countryside, now flying past the window, was becoming wilder. The neat fields had gone. Now there were woods, twisting rivers, and dark green hills. There was a knock on the door of their compartment, and the round-faced boy Harry had passed on the platform 9 3/4 came in. He looked tearful. "Sorry," he said, "but have you seen a toad at all?" When they shook their heads, he wailed, "I've lost him. He keeps getting away from me." "He'll turn up," said Harry. "Yes," said the boy miserably. "Well, if you see him—" He left. "Don't know why he's so bothered," said Ron. "If I had brought a toad, I'd lose it as quick as I could. Mind you, I brought Scabbers, so I can't talk." The rat was still snoozing on Ron's lap. "He might have died, and you wouldn't know the difference," said Ron in disgust. "I tried to turn him yellow yesterday to make him more interesting, but the spell didn't work. I'll show you. Look." He rummaged around his trunk and pulled out a very battered-looking wand. It was chipped in places, and something white was glinting at the end. "Unicorn hair's nearly poking out. Anyway." He had just raised his wand when the compartment door slid open again. The toadless boy was back, but this time he had a girl with him. She was already wearing her new Hogwarts robes. "Has anyone seen a toad? Neville's lost one," she said. She had a bossy sort of voice, lots of bushy brown hair, and rather large front teeth. "We've already told him we haven't seen it," said Ron, but the girl wasn't listening. She was looking at the wand in his hand. "Oh, are you doing magic? Let's see." She sat down. Ron looked taken aback. All right." He cleared his throat. "Sunshine, daisies, buttermellow, turn this stupid fat rat yellow." He waved his wand, but nothing happened. Scabbers stayed gray and fast asleep. Are you sure that's a real spell? Said the girl. Well, it's not very good, is it? I tried a few simple spells just for practice, and it's all worked for me. Nobody in my family's magic at all. It was ever such a surprise when I got my letter, but I was ever so pleased. Of course, I mean, it's the very best school of witchcraft there is. I've heard. I've learned all our set of books by heart, of course. I just hope it will be enough. I'm Hermione Granger, by the way. Who are you? She said all of this very fast. By the way, just like some quick illustrations of Harry and Ron. And Scabbers is there. Harry looked at Ron and was relieved to see by his stunned face that he hadn't learned all the set of books by heart either. I'm Ron Weasley, Ron muttered. Harry Potter, said Harry. Are you really? Said Hermione. I know all about you, of course. I got a few extra books for background reading, and you're in modern magical history and the rise and fall of the dark arts and great wizarding events of the 20th century. Am I? Said Harry, feeling dazed. Goodness, didn't you know? I'd have found out everything I could if it was me, said Hermione. Do either of you know what house you'll be in? I've been asking around, and I hope I'm in Gryffindor. It sounds by far the best. I hear Dumbledore himself is one, but I suppose Ravenclaw wouldn't be too bad. Anyway, we'd better go and look for Neville's Toad. You two had better change, you know. I expect we'll be there soon. And she left, taking the toadless boy with her. Whatever house I'm in, I hope she's not in it, said Ron. He threw his wand back into his trunk. Stupid spell. George gave it to me, but he knew it was a dud. What house are your brothers in? Asked Harry. Gryffindor, said Ron. Gloom seemed to be settling on him again. Mom and Dad were in it too. I don't know what they'll say if I'm not. I don't suppose Ravenclaw would be too bad, but imagine if they put me in Slytherin. That's the house you know who was in. Yeah, said Ron. He flopped back into his seat, looking depressed. You know, I think the ends of Scabbard's whiskers are a bit lighter, said Harry, trying to take Ron's mind off houses. So, what do your oldest brothers do now they've left anyway? Harry was wondering what a wizard did once he finished school. Charlie's in Romania studying dragons, and Bill's in Africa doing something for Gringotts, said Ron. Did you hear about Gringotts? It's been all over the Daily Prophet, but I don't suppose you get that with the Muggles. Someone tried to rob a high-security vault. Harry stared. Really? What happened to them? Nothing. That's why it's such big news. They haven't been caught. My dad says it must have been a powerful dark wizard to get around Gringotts, but they don't think they took anything. That's what's odd. Of course, everyone gets scared when something like this happens in case you know who's behind it. Everyone turned this news over in his mind. He was starting to get a prickle of fear every time you know who was mentioned. He supposed this was all part of entering the magical world, but had been a lot more comfortable saying Voldemort without worrying. What's your Quidditch team? Ron asked. I don't know, Harry confessed. What? Ron looked dumbfounded. Oh, you wait. It's the best game in the world. And he was off, explaining all about the 4 balls and the positions of the 7 players, describing famous games he'd been to with his brothers and the broomstick he'd like to get if he had the money. He was just taking Harry through the finer points of the game when the compartment door slid open yet again, but it wasn't Neville the Toadless Boy or Hermione Granger this time. 3 boys entered, and Harry recognized the middle one at once. It was the pale boy from Madame Malkin's robe shop. He was looking at Harry with a lot more interest than he'd shown back in Diagon Alley. Is it true, he said? They're saying all down the train that Harry Potter's in this compartment. So it's you, is it? Yes, said Harry. He was looking at the other boys. Both of them were thick-set and looked extremely mean. Standing either side of the pale boy, they looked like bodyguards. Oh, this is Crabbe and this is Goyle, said the pale boy carelessly, noticing where Harry was looking. My name's Malfoy. Draco Malfoy. Ron gave a slight cough, which might have been hiding a snigger. Draco Malfoy looked at him. Think my name's funny, do you? No need to ask who you are. My father told me all the Weasleys have red hair, freckles, and more children than they can afford. He turned back to Harry. You'll soon find out some wizarding families are much better than others, Potter. You don't want to go making friends with the wrong sort. I can help you there. He held out his hand to shake Harry's, but Harry didn't take it. I think I can tell who the wrong sort are for myself, thanks, he said coolly. Draco Malfoy didn't go red, but a pink tinge appeared in his pale cheeks. I'd be careful if I were you, Potter, he said slowly. Unless you're a bit politer, you'll go the same way as your parents. They didn't know what was good for them either. You hang around with riff-raff like the Weasleys and that Hagrid, and it'll rub off on you. Both Harry and Ron stood up. Ron's face was as red as his hair. Say that again, he said. Oh, you're going to fight us, are you? Malfoy sneered. Unless you get out now, said Harry, more bravely than he felt, because Crabbe and Goyle were a lot bigger than him and Ron. We don't feel like leaving, do we, boys? We've eaten all our food, and you still seem to have some. Goyle reached toward the chocolate frogs next to Ron. Ron leapt forward, but before he'd as much as touched Goyle, Goyle let out a horrible yell. Scabbers the rat was hanging off his finger. Sharp little teeth sunk deep into Goyle's knuckle. Crabbe and Malfoy backed away as Goyle swung Scabbers round and round, howling. And when Scabbers finally flew off and hit the window, all three of them disappeared at once. Perhaps they thought there were more rats lurking among the sweets, or perhaps they had heard footsteps, because a second later Hermione Granger had come in. "What has been going on?" she said, looking at the sweets all over the floor and Ron picking up Scabbers by his tail. "I think he's been knocked out," Ron said to Harry. He looked closer at Scabbers. "No, I don't believe it. He's gone back to sleep." And so he had. "You've met Malfoy before," Harry explained about their meeting in Diagon Alley. "I've heard of his family," said Ron darkly. "They were some of the first to come back to our side after you-know-who disappeared. Said they'd been bewitched. My dad doesn't believe it. He said Malfoy's father didn't need an excuse to go over to the dark side." He turned to Hermione. "Can we help you with something?" "You better hurry up and put your robes on. I've just been up the front to ask the driver, and he says we're nearly there. You haven't been fighting, have you? You'll be in trouble before we even get there." "Scabbers has been fighting, not us," said Ron, scowling at her. "Would you mind leaving while we change?" "All right, I only came in here because people outside are behaving very childishly, racing up and down the corridors," said Hermione in a sniffy voice. "And you've got dirt on your nose, by the way. Did you know?" Ron glared at her as she left. Harry peered out of the window. It was getting dark. He could see mountains and forests under a deep purple sky. The train did seem to be slowing down. He and Ron took off their jackets and pulled on their long black robes. Ron's were a bit short for him. You could see his trainers underneath them. A voice echoed through the train. "We will be reaching Hogwarts in 5 minutes' time. Please leave your luggage in the train. It will be taken to the school separately." Harry's stomach lurched with nerves, and Ron he saw looked pale under his freckles. They crammed their pockets with the last of the sweets and joined the crowd thronging the corridor. The train slowed right down and finally stopped. People pushed their way towards the door and out onto a tiny, dark platform. Harry shivered in the cold night air. Then a lamp came bobbing over the heads of the students, and Harry heard a familiar voice. First years over here. All right there, Harry." Here's an image of Hogwarts through the fog. Hagrid's big, hairy face beamed over the sea of heads. "Come on, follow me. Any more first years?" "First years, follow me." Slipping and stumbling, they followed Hagrid down what seemed to be a steep, narrow path. It was so dark either side of them that Harry thought there must be thick trees there. Nobody spoke much. Neville, the boy who kept losing his toad, sniffed once or twice. "You'll get your first sight of Hogwarts in a sec," Harry called over his shoulder. "Just round this bend here." There was a loud "ooh." The narrow path had opened suddenly onto the edge of a great black lake. Perched atop a high mountain on the other side, its windows sparkling in the starry sky, was a vast castle with many turrets and towers. "No more, and forward to a boat," Hagrid called, pointing to a fleet of little boats sitting in the water by the shore. Harry and Ron were followed into their boat by Neville and Hermione. "Everyone in?" shouted Hagrid, who had a boat to himself. "Right then. Forward!" And the fleet of little boats moved off all at once, gliding across the lake, which was as smooth as glass. Everyone was silent, staring up at the castle overhead. It towered over them as they sailed nearer and nearer to the cliff on which it stood. "Heads down!" yelled Hagrid as the first boats reached the cliff. They all bent their heads, and the little boats carried them through a curtain of ivy which hid a wide opening in the cliff face. They were carried along a dark tunnel which seemed to be taking them right underneath the castle until they reached a kind of underground harbor, where they clambered out onto rocks and pebbles. "Oh, you there! Is this your toad?" said Hagrid, who was checking the boats as people climbed out of them. "Trevor!" cried Neville, blissfully holding out his hands. Then they clambered up a passageway in the rock after Hagrid's lamp coming out at last onto the smooth, damp grass right in the shadow of the castle. They walked up a flight of stone steps and crowded around the huge oak front door. "Everyone here? You there, still got your toad?" Hagrid raised a gigantic fist and knocked 3 times on the castle door. All right. Next time we do this, we will be going into Hogwarts, finally. It's been quite a journey to get there. Thank you all for coming to listen, and that's all for the night. Have fun talking about community, and I will see you all tomorrow night for movie night. Bye, guys.